thank you all for being here. This is a wonderful honor. So, tonight I'd like to introduce our two candidates. To my right, we have Mr. Beau LaFave. He is a lifelong Upper Peninsula resident from Iron Mountain and a former Republican state representative. He served 3 terms in the Michigan House, representing the 108th District from 2017 through 2022, before leaving office due to term limits. During his time in Lansing, he served on several committees, including military, veterans, and homeland security, which he chaired. He is now a Republican candidate for Michigan's 38th State Senate District. And to my left, we have Representative Dave Preston. He is the Republican State Representative from Cedar River, first elected to the Michigan House in 2022. He represents the 108th District and currently serves as Vice Chair of the House Energy Committee, while also serving on committees related to health policy, natural resources, tourism, transportation, and infrastructure. Before serving in legislature, he worked as a small business owner, community commissioner, energy cooperative board member, and volunteer paramedic and firefighter. He is now a Republican candidate for Michigan's 38th State Senate District. And so now I will go over tonight's rules. So each candidate will be given a question and allowed 1 minute to answer. The other candidate will be given the same amount of time for the same question. The next question will be asked first to the second candidate and then to the first candidate. This will continue until all the questions have been given to each candidate. Each candidate will then be given a unique question prepared to them by the UP Patriots Forum Committee. Each candidate will be given up to 3 minutes to answer this question. Time will be kept by Tyrell Sepola, who is right over there. You'll be given a notice by holding up a card. There is a 30-second card, a 15-second card, and finally there will be a hand count from 5 to 4, 3, 2, 1. We will then conclude with closing remarks from the candidates in order of the coin toss. And now it is time for that coin toss. Heads is going to be Mr. Representative LaFave, and tails will be Representative Preston. It is heads. So, Mr. LaFave, you will be able to decide who gives the first opening remarks and who will deliver the first response to the first question. Mr. Preston. Mr. Preston, you will be allowed to give the first question and your opening statement.
Well, thank you everybody for the invitation today. Zach, thank you for the wonderful venue that we're enjoying. Very happy to be up here. Is it me? There we go. Check 1, 2. Oh, wait. So my folks were married in Precious Blood Church in Stevenson, Michigan. I was born in Menominee Falls and raised in Menominee Falls, and returned up to Stevenson for my baptism, and worked a full career in the Wisconsin area, and met my wife in Chicago when I was in Chicago for 8 years, not 40. And my primary jobs throughout the years were revolved around food and beverage. The summers as a kid growing up, I would come up to the UP almost every single summer. My grandfather started out as a dairy farmer in Stevenson, lost the farm during the late 80s farm aid crisis, and they moved over into timber. It was Dufferin Brothers Lumber. They did spec lumber during that time with a dry kiln. Financially, they also succumbed to that, and all of my uncles broke up, and my Uncle Charlie started a separate business called Forte Lumber, which to this day they're building pallets down in Stevenson, and they also do timber jobbing on their own. What brought me up here was after we sold our restaurant in Milwaukee, we had just had our daughter. She was 11 months old, and I saw an opportunity. I saw the urban decay back then in the Milwaukee area. We were living in Menominee Falls, and I located up in Cedar River, as the crow flies, about a half mile away from the truck stop that we bought. We bought that out of a bankruptcy. It had been shut down for almost 2 years. And I've been a turnaround a guy my whole life. I usually was sent into properties that were failing, and I'm the one that usually figured out whether or not we were going to reformat them, we were going to close them, retool them, or just find a different management structure and or venue, if you will. You know, the way the place operates. Some places are sports bars. Some places go further into fine dining. Is that my time? Okay. So after all of that, we moved up into the UP. I, opened up Cedar River Plaza, ran that for 10 years, and sold that about 8 years ago. Became a county commissioner shortly after that because my sheriff had talked me into running for that role. Served 2 terms as a county commissioner and served as a paramedic at a hospital-based ALS system in Marinette that serves southern Menominee County. So I was an elected official throughout COVID, watching what COVID did to our communities, as well as watching what COVID did to our communities from a healthcare standpoint, serving as a paramedic in the Menominee-Marinette area, because we only have one hospital down there. It's a Wisconsin-based hospital that serves both the Michigan side and the Wisconsin side. And that really brought me to experiencing what I experienced during COVID, really brought me to run for the 108th. During that time, I served 10 years on the Elger Delta Board of Directors, ran Elger Delta for just short of 2 years. It taught me a tremendous amount about energy and just how volatile we are, and how energy impoverished the UP is and continues to be. At the end of the day, I'm working to help all of you. I've been watching the Upper Peninsula be in a constant tailspin of degradation for my whole life. I was born in 1965, and I can honestly say I've been coming up to the UP throughout my entire life and watching it just fade away. And it continues to this day. And that's what compelled me to serve. And that's why I am continuing to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opening statement. All right. Representative LaFave, it is your turn to give your opening statement.
Well, testing. Good evening, everybody. My name is Beau LaFave. I was born and raised in Iron Mountain, Michigan. Born at the Iron Mountain Hospital, where I had some significant medical complications. They airlifted me to Milwaukee Children's Hospital, where I spent 6 weeks in intensive neonatal care. They fixed all the life-threatening problems, but at age 2, they had to amputate my left leg. I now walk and run for office with the assistance of a prosthetic. What that taught me is life isn't always easy, especially here in the Upper Peninsula. You can choose to let that define you, or you can decide to work hard and get up every day, not make excuses, and go to work and get stuff done. Graduated from Kingsford High School. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I went off to Michigan State University, got my degree in international relations and political economy, and then went off to Wayne State University Law School. But every time I looked on Facebook or heard from friends or family back home, I heard another friend who kept leaving the UP because they couldn't afford to live up here and moving away. So I put my law degree on hold. I went back home to Iron Mountain, and I ran for state representative. Now the Chamber of Commerce and every special interest group in Lansing endorsed my primary opponent. But I knocked on 5,000 doors and won the Republican nomination. Then the Democrats showed up, and they spent $600,000 to beat a 24-year-old law school dropout from Iron Mountain, the most expensive state rep seat in the history of the Upper Peninsula up to that point. And I beat the sitting Democrat sheriff of Dickinson County because I knocked on 10,000 more doors. And then I went down to Lansing and fought for the people of the Upper Peninsula. When Gretchen Whitmer came out with 15 days to slow the spread, I was the first and only lawmaker in the state of Michigan to oppose it on day one. I said 15 days, it's never going to end. They're going to want 15, and then another 15, and then another 15. And what happened? I was right. Before the polling came back and the rest of my Republican colleagues showed up 2 months later, I was things back up in the Upper Peninsula. When Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson tried to count absentee ballots in the 2020 election, after the election was over, I sued and I won. Gretchen Whitmer wanted to keep us closed. I went to the state Supreme Court with the rest of the Republicans, and we ended the COVID-19 restrictions from the governor. We went out and collected hundreds of thousands of signatures with Unlock Michigan and put an end to that. We had the highest car insurance prices in the nation. I told you I'd go down to Lansing and fix it. After 3 years, for the first time in 50 years, car insurance prices went down because I fought to lower your car insurance prices, and I got the signature of the governor. The minute I left office, Gretchen Whitmer and the Democrat-controlled Supreme Court threw out all of my reforms. The Upper Peninsula has our problems, and part of them is it's too difficult for our young people to stay and live up here. And it's not just young people, don't get me wrong, but that's what got me into this. I want our kids and our grandkids to be able to live the same UP dream that I did, and it's slipping away. We need a fighter to go down to Lansing, not a go along, get along kind of guy. We need somebody that's going to stand up on principle, not wait for public polling to come back, but is going to stand up and fight for the Upper Peninsula. That's what I did for 6 years as your state representative. I was term limited. I couldn't seek re-election for the state rep seat of the 108th district. I had to leave. My opponent didn't have to. He chose to run against me. Could have continued serving in the State House. This was my only option to serve you. I ask for your support on August 4th because I was born and raised in the Upper Peninsula. Nobody's going to fight harder for the Upper Peninsula than I will. I personally knocked 5,000 doors in all 15 counties, including Keweenaw. And I just don't want to see this slip away. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, Representative LaFave. And now it is time for the questions. So, Representative Preston, here is your first question. What is the single greatest threat to the future of the Upper Peninsula, and what is the first bill you would introduce to address it?
So those bills have already been introduced. They're the bills to basically codify the natural gas generation that was cited after, Shiras, Presque Isle, and the coal burning facility down in Escanaba were shut down. After that shutdown with our coal burning plants, we had right around 500 megawatts of capacity. As soon as they shut down MISO, which is the system operator, so they're the gatekeepers for the electrons in the Midwest. We live in Region 2. MISO came down with the system support resource payments, and they threatened us with egregious penalties. So we cited the natural gas generators, and the legislation that Carl Bonek and myself have introduced passed the House with 81 votes. They're sitting in the Senate, and they will extend the natural gas burners out to 2040.
Well, thank you very much. And now we give it to you, Representative LaFave. I'll read this again. What is the single greatest threat to the future of the Upper Peninsula, and what is the first bill you would introduce to address it?
The biggest threat facing the Upper Peninsula are people not from the Upper Peninsula telling us the way we need to live our lives. Whether it be Gretchen Whitmer or the radical Democrats that introduced the Green New Scam legislation that'll shut down our power plants, or the Natural Resources Commission that's made up almost exclusively of downstate Democrats. The Upper Peninsula needs to be able to govern ourselves. Of course, the first bill that I'll introduce is the bill to get rid of the Green New Scam energy bill passed by the radical Democrats the minute that I left office. But in addition to that, I want to bring back my Upper Peninsula Natural Resources Commission that would let us write our hunting and fishing laws for the UP. I think we can govern ourselves.
And thank you very much. And now, keeping it with you, Representative LaFave, here is question 2. The UP often feels forgotten by Lansing. Give one specific example of where you would break with your own party if it was necessary to defend this district.
I can't think of a single example where the Republicans in the state house were going to screw the Upper Peninsula, and I needed to break with them. And if it did happen, it didn't come up for a vote because I'd beat that thing in the Republican caucus. I can't tell you the number of times behind closed doors, and you can believe me if you want, or you can choose not to, but the number of bills that I murdered behind closed doors that would have had devastating impacts on the Upper Peninsula are countless. Now, a lot of legislators would like to tout the number of bills they got signed, which I had plenty, but I'm much more proud of the bills that I killed inside caucus that never got to see the light of day. And I voted no on more bills than I believe any of my Republican colleagues for 6 years.
Thank you very much. Now, Representative Preston. The UP often feels forgotten by Lansing. Give one specific example of where you would break with your own party if it was necessary to defend this district.
Yes, that's already happened for Rep. Markin and myself. The UP has a tremendous amount of skilled seasonal labor. And our unemployment benefits and the duration of those unemployment benefits have been forgotten for a very long time. Rep. Markin and myself broke from our caucus and voted for the extension and the increase in benefits because we were hemorrhaging skilled labor during the wintertime when they weren't able to work to Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of the surrounding Midwestern states that were offering longer-term benefits and higher benefits. And how are we ever going to get going economically when we're losing all of our high-skilled blue-collar labor, the operators, the carpenters, everybody that's exposed to a seasonality in their work? We were losing them to surrounding states.
Thank you very much. And now, keeping it with you, Representative Preston, housing is limiting workforce growth across the UP. What specific state policy would you support to create more workforce housing without stripping control from local communities?
So one of the bills that we did get through the House this term was the Land Division Act. The Land Division Act was at four parcels. We were able to get that increased to 10 parcels, which I think had a profound effect on one of the developers up here in Houghton County. But at the end of the day, the things that really matter are workforce development. We are incredibly short on workforce, materials, and material shortfalls as well as material expense. And the largest of all is Lansing and its building codes. The building codes in Lansing have an environmental primer to them that really puts them in a situation where instead of putting in a double pane window, you're mandated to put in a triple pane. Instead of putting in a standard insulation like an R15, you're required to put it in an R30. And these types of things build up the cost of building a house and are really just stagnating the entire industry, coupled with high interest rates.
Thank you very much, Representative Preston. And now, over to you, Representative LaFave. Housing is limiting workforce growth across the UP. What specific state policy would you support to create more workforce housing without stripping control from local communities?
So I introduced this bill 10 years ago. The reason that nobody will build a house in Houghton, Marquette, Iron Mountain is because our taxes are way too high. All the new building that's done in the Upper Peninsula is done in the township because the taxes are lower. What we need to do is encourage investment in our communities, in our cities, our villages, and our townships. So I introduced a bill that would say, if you build a house in Houghton, go ahead and pay the same property taxes you were. We're not going to uncap your property taxes. We'll give you 10 years at the lower property tax rate as an incentive to build or an incentive to renovate, because everybody knows when you sell your house, the new homeowner gets a massive tax increase. We want to make sure that they can actually afford to build that house. After 10 years of the lower taxes, they got 10 years of a mortgage payment behind them. They can refinance that mortgage and they won't see an out-of-pocket increase. That's how you bring investment to the Upper Peninsula without losing local control.
All right, keeping things with you, Representative LaFave. UP families, seniors, schools, and businesses face high heating and electricity needs. What is your energy plan for affordability, reliability, and grid capacity?
We need to get rid of the green new scam energy policy. Obviously, that's important, and I know my opponent's going to say the same thing. On that, we agree. Part of the problem we got is that Governor Granholm, when she set this whole thing up, Governor Granholm wanted to do the Green New Deal 20 years ago when she was the governor, but she couldn't do it because the UP power companies were owned by Wisconsin. So she made them divest those companies. So that's why they spun off all these UP power companies. When they did that, they sold us all the pension debt for Wisconsin. So that's like 60% of your bill that you're paying right now is for old Wisconsin pension debt. I'm going to work with the White House on that issue because there's no reason that 300,000 residents of the Upper Peninsula should have to pay the pension debt of 5 million Wisconsiners.
Thank you very much. Now over to Representative Preston. Let me read this again. UP families, seniors, schools, and businesses face high heating and electricity needs. What is your energy plan for affordability, reliability, and grid capacity?
We've already entered the bills to repeal both the clean energy as well as the renewable energy mandates that were thrust upon us back during Granholm, as well as the ones when we were in minority and Jen Hill was representing the 109. She literally cast the deciding vote to put almost every single energy-intensive job in jeopardy in the Upper Peninsula. At the end of the day, the UP is comprised of municipal, cooperative, investor-owned utilities that span across the entire UP. In order for us to get a handle on this, we've got to get serious about getting our generation capacity in the UP up. Just remember, we went from 500 megawatts when we were burning coal down to under 240 now with these brand new RICE generators that they want to shut down. We have to get serious about energy generation in the Upper Peninsula. We need to look at all of the above, and we need to keep pushing, or we're gonna completely deindustrialize and depopulate the Upper Peninsula.
Thank you for your response. And now this question is a long one. Where do you stand on mining projects like Copperwood, the Highland Copper Mining Company, in that they are requesting funding in the area of $50 million for infrastructure from Michigan taxpayers? Would Michigan recoup the money in the future? If so, how? Also, local environmentalists are raising red flags over certain mining practices that may damage the natural beauty and integrity of the Porkies. What measures are being taken to ensure the mining company does minimal damage while extracting and returns the area back to its original state? That's right.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of Copperwood. We have been fighting, the delegation as a whole, including Senator McBroom, has been fighting for Copperwood from the beginning. Protect the Porkies has done a great disinformation campaign and has really stalled this project. At the end of the day, on the west end of the Upper Peninsula, the extraction industries that stand to blossom cannot be understated. I just got done knocking all over the west. You know, we have our camper in Ontonagon, and there are so many people, and so we were just in White Pine, and the White Pine people feel like they've been forgotten. The UP delegation is going to continue to work for them and try to bring in a new renaissance of extraction on the west end of the Upper Peninsula.
Thank you very much. And now over to you, Representative LaFave. I shall read this all again.
That's all right.
Oh, that's all right? Okay.
So I served 2 years with the late, great Senator Tom Casperson. And I believe today would be his birthday. We lost him too soon. Senator Casperson wanted to bring mining to the Upper Peninsula in the best of way, but he didn't want to hurt the environment either. And so he sat down with radical Democrats, radical environmentalists, and pro-mining people in the industry. And they sat down on a table with 18 different groups. And they said, is there mining rules that you could agree to? And by the end of 6 months of discussion, every single radical environmentalist and pro-mining person in the entire state of Michigan agreed if we could mine based on this law, it would be safe for the environment and it would be beneficial. That's the mining law we have in the state of Michigan. We have the strongest environmental protection laws in the entire world in the state of Michigan. We can do it safely, and we can bring jobs to the Upper Peninsula, which will recoup the $50 million through income tax.
All right. Thank you very much for your response. And now, keeping this with you, Representative LaFave, What changes would you support to Michigan's road funding formula so rural counties with many miles of road and a small tax base are treated fairly?
One of the biggest problems we have in the state of Michigan is that the state is too big. Just like Washington is too big. Too much money goes down to Lansing, never to be seen again. That's why I want to repeal the 10% state property tax, which is about $3 billion. When I started, it was $55 billion state budget 10 years ago. Now it's almost 90. We need to shrink the state government. Part of that is, if you notice the roads, especially in Iron Mountain on US 2, they keep repaving US 2 and M28 when it looks like it's darn near paved in gold. But you go into our cities, and our city streets look like they got bombed in Iran. We need to cut some of that MDOT funding that goes to the state highways and bring it to our county, city, village, and township roads. That's part of what we need to do. We don't need to raise taxes on registration and fuel like my opponent did. We need to take some of the money from MDOT.
Thank you very much. And now, Representative Preston.
Yeah, for the record, the only registration that got increased was EVs and plug-in hybrids, which I'm not a big EV fan. I don't know a lot of people that are. We needed to get sales tax off of fuel. And at the end of the day, we were delivered a 3.5% increase in road funding to every municipal government, every county road commission. And that's going to, for this area, that's going to be in the multiple millions. I didn't run the numbers for Houghton County alone, but I would, just guessing off the cuff, be 3 to 4 million, even more than that if you include the local governments. We did a transformational change in road funding that's just starting to see the benefits in Michigan. And as this continues to flourish, it's going to get greater and greater. And you're going to start to see local road commissions and local public works departments get ahead of what's going on your local roads, your county roads, and for public transportation.
Well, thank you very much. So, keeping things with you, there have been inquiries about putting data centers in the Upper Peninsula. What has your stance been on data centers in the past? And as our senator, how would you respond to a developer that wanted to place one in the UP?
So, as the vice chair on energy, one thing that I can tell you is the energy curve in the UP has been descending so rapidly that the thought of a data center siting itself in the Upper Peninsula just isn't functionally possible. We barely have enough electrons and produce enough electrons to keep our lights on as it is now. On top of that, the transmission lines that we have, we only have 2 transmission lines that could even possibly serve a hyperscale data center. And any data center would have to be sited in that area. But when you look at how energy impoverished the Upper Peninsula is, any talk of a hyperscale data center or even a mid-range data center siting in the Upper Peninsula is just plain to the audience because it's physically can't happen. We don't have the electrons to deliver, and neither does Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. And now to you, Representative LaFave. Sure. There have been inquiries about putting data centers in the Upper Peninsula. What has your stance been on data centers in the past? And as our senator, how would you respond to a developer that wanted to place one in the UP?
Well, the first thing I wouldn't do would be give a tax break to bring data centers to the state of Michigan. Unfortunately, my opponent did. In the Upper Peninsula, we already pay the highest electricity prices, the second highest in the nation. I propose that in the Upper Peninsula, we have a moratorium on all AI data center construction in the UP until at a bare minimum they can prove they're not going to increase our already exorbitant electricity prices. Now, once they do that, I don't believe that Lansing should have much more control over that. It should be up to our local cities, villages, and townships, because it's impossible for us to get rid of Gretchen Whitmer or whoever the next governor is or influence state policy. But if you got a stupid county commission or you got a stupid city council, we can have influence over that. I want less state control and more local control, but I need to make sure they don't raise our electricity prices first.
Well, thank you very much. And so, for the next question, during your time in the House, what is the most important piece of legislation you personally helped to pass that directly benefited the Upper Peninsula, and how would that experience shape your first priority as senator?
I said when I ran for state representative the first time, I went down to Lansing to get internships for high school students and car insurance reform. The first bill I got signed was to get 30 pages of red tape keeping our high school students out of internships to show them that there's great high-paying jobs here in the UP and get them valuable skills outside of the classroom. But once I was out of internship bills, I turned my sights on car insurance reform. The problem is you got ambulance-chasing lawyers who make what I call a lawyer's pension off of the car insurance rates. Somebody gets injured, they go to the hospital, they get a bill. They don't send it to the insurance company, they send it to the lawyer first. And then the lawyer sues the insurance company and collects a third of your medical benefits for the lifetime of the claim. My bill stopped that. There's hundreds of other stupid examples. Unfortunately, Governor Whitmer and the Democrat Supreme Court threw out most of the reform, and that's why your prices are up. I'm going to go back down to Lansing and fix it again.
Well, thank you very much. Representative Preston?
Thank you. Just to correct the record, in 2019, my opponent did vote for tax breaks for data centers. In fact, he voted for some of the worst, which was property tax incentives for a good data center down in Grand Rapids. My vote was simply for tax incentives on equipment and personal property within the facility. The most important legislation that I ran was my EMS legislation. It was an adaptive care license that is going to allow a BLS rig, that's basic life support, to flex up into a limited ALS rig, depending on who's on board. Right now, if I'm on a basic life support rig, as a paramedic, I can only work to that level. The bill that I have before the governor will allow me, if I'm on that rig, to work at a limited ALS, which brings a completely different pro forma to the patient when we are on scene, and is going to completely change things and patient outcomes in the Upper Peninsula where our transport times are so long.
Thank you very much. And now for our last regular question. At the end of your term, what measurable result would voters use to judge whether you have succeeded?
I think at the end of my term, results could be based on economics, the economic vitality of the Upper Peninsula, our energy bills, and where our energy trajectory is, essential services such as healthcare, mental health, fire. You know, when I go around to all the volunteer fire departments in the Upper Peninsula, I see a tremendous amount of gray hair. I'm 60 years old, and most of the people that are serving on the fire departments in the districts that I visit, which have been all across the UP, are full of people my age. There is no succession, and we have to change that. The UP has to get busy protecting itself, because I'm telling you, no one in Lansing understands what we're going through. That's all I have.
Well, thank you very much. Representative LaFave?
The Upper Peninsula needs to stop the outward migration of our brightest and best kids. They go down to college, spend 40 years, the most productive years of their life outside of the UP, and then maybe come back home to retire. Lansing and the Democrats want to turn the UP into a retirement village filled with nothing but wolves and tourists. The way we're going to do that is we need to have the car insurance prices go back down again. I need to cut your property taxes for all of us in the Upper Peninsula. We need the UP Natural Resources Commission that will allow us to do our hunting and fishing rules so we can manage our game species properly. By those metrics should I be judged if I was successful. And I might add, after my internship bill passed and was signed into law, we had a 5 times increase in the number of students getting internships in high school.
Well, thank you very much. And now on to the individual questions, starting with Representative Preston. Republican primary voters often say that they want a fighter. Representative Preston, are you a fighter, a consensus builder, or both? Give a specific example.
I think if you've watched any of my excerpts from both Natural Resources, Energy Committee, when they were trying to push through the energy rewrite that mandated carbon neutrality by 2040, you will see right there that I'm a fighter. You got to remember, I'm a person that ran a business for 10 years in Michigan. Michigan is one of the most difficult states. I've told several of my fellow reps down there that if I had to choose between Illinois or Michigan to start a business again, I would go to Illinois. That's how hard it is to start and run a business in Michigan, and that has to change. At the end of the day, I will never stop fighting for the Upper Peninsula because I feel that there is no region of Michigan that is more disadvantaged than the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and for that I fight.
Thank you very much. And now, Representative LaFave, your question. You have a reputation as a fighter. How would you represent voters who did not like your style or who did not vote for you?
There's a lot of politicians who will stand up and they'll tell you a different message because they know what you want to hear. I'm not one of those guys. When you get me with a microphone in a room of 200 people or one-on-one at your front door, it's the same guy. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you what I think. And you know what? Sometimes that gets me in trouble. It would be a heck of a lot easier just to lie and to say what I know you want to hear. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think, and you may not like it, but at least you know it's the truth. I can't tell you the number of people that I spoke to at the UP State Fair over the years who were mad at me for something that I did. But they'd shake my hand at the end of the conversation, still mad, saying they disagreed with me, but that they'd vote for me because at least they could trust me.
Well, thank you very much. And now it is time for your closing remarks. Let's begin with you, Representative Preston.
Well, I first want to thank everybody for coming today and for Zach for that. Looked like I didn't have any, but it looked like a wonderful meal and allowing us to use this wonderful venue. My daughter's going into her senior year at Tech this year, and we have really embraced the UP in every way, shape, or form, and I'm going to continue to. 60 years old, my wife and I are putting off our retirement so that I can continue to serve for you. I can serve for a full 8 years. I'm the only one at this forum that can serve for a full 8 years. And you have my promise that I'll continue to talk to everybody, listen to your concerns, and I'll bring the fight to Lansing in a pragmatic way where we can build coalitions and actually see progress for the UP. Thank you.
And now, Representative LaFave, your closing remark.
I was born and raised in the Upper Peninsula. I didn't spend 40 years in Illinois and Wisconsin. I've been here the whole time, with the exception of the time I was in law school, which my opponent's campaign is now calling me Lansing Lion LaFave. Unfortunately, there's not a law school in the Upper Peninsula. The problem is we send people down to Lansing that promise they're going to be a conservative, that promise they're going to fight for the Upper Peninsula, and then they vote to raise our taxes. For 6 years as the state representative for Dickinson, Delta, and Menominee counties, I never raised your taxes. My opponent's raised them 5 times now in 3 years. And now he says he wants you to elect him for 8 years. I don't think that's a wise choice. I think we should elect somebody with a proven record of standing up to the radical Democrats when it was unpopular, who never raised your taxes and is born and raised in the Upper Peninsula. We can take a gamble. Maybe he won't raise your taxes anymore, but he raised your gas tax, your unemployment tax. Now you get 6 months of unemployment. The vehicle registration, the weed tax, and the income tax. I voted for none of it. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you. So, this has been the UP Patriots Senate Candidate Forum. I want to thank you all for having come out. And once again, thank you to the UP Patriots for allowing me to have been the moderator for tonight. And now I shall hand things back to Zach.
All right. Well, thank you to the two candidates. Thank you to Sam for moderating that. That is a buttery, silky voice. I appreciate you lending it here tonight. And I appreciate all of you who came here to support this and actually made it so this could be a successful event. And so I will reiterate on the announcements. Next month, we'll be having, hopefully, Greg Markin in here to answer some questions. Dirty dishes can go back there. We still have some desserts in the back. We have donation boxes for the UP Patriots, and if you wish to pay for the lovely evening meal that we had as well. Other than that, I'd like to hand things over to Levi for a closing prayer, and then we'll get you all on your way.
So thank you once again, gentlemen, for sharing those views with us this evening. Let's bow our heads in our closing prayer. Father, we thank you for this evening, for the time together. We thank you for being able to hear from these candidates, their hopes and concerns for the UP. We pray, Father, that your grace will be with them as they go through their campaign. Help them to follow your principles, even in the campaign, which are a challenging time. Father, we pray that the right man will be elected, that you'll give him the grace and wisdom to do the right thing and to follow righteousness and peace. Father, may your will be done. Guide us safely home this evening as we go. We close this service in the name of Christ our Savior. Amen.